Hi, guys.
Hey.
Hey, Patty.
Hey, how you doing, Christopher?
Is this mine or yours?
That's yours.
All right. Get away from my water.
Right. Yes, Christopher. No, we just had this conversation. No, we just had this conversation that his actual legal name is Chris.
That's right.
That's right. It's not a shortened down version of it. So whoever's changed that on the Wikipedia, please stop.
Yeah, you guys lobby Wikipedia to change my name. All right. Good. So glad to see you guys.
So first of all, how have you been?
I'm always. I actually had this conversation with Giancarlo Esposito, whom I didn't know, and I walked up to him yesterday, and we were sort of chatting outside the men's room, of all places, and we're talking, and I'm telling him what a fan I am of his, and he said, "Well, how you doing?" And I said, Giancarlo, if I said to you, well, this is happening and that's happening, but I learned something from my mom when my mom was 95 years old or something like that. And she was in a wheelchair. She had any number of problems that people have when they get older. And whenever you called my mom, if I didn't see her in person, I'd pick up the phone and say, "Hi, Mom, how you doing?" And she'd say, "I feel great." And there's something about the positive affirmation, if you say it out loud, that it becomes that thing, right? That if when anybody asks you, "How you doing?" and you say, "Well, I had a problem on my last shoot with this and that happened." And so I said to Giancarlo, he said, "How you doing?" And I said, "Giancarlo, if I told you anything other than I feel great, just if you have something large in your hand, just smack me upside the head for being stupid, for not having gratitude for what I have." And that's the way I feel. Now, I could tell you about my aches and pains, but...
Well, he's a beacon in his own right. No question about that. It's like, "How you doing, man? How's it going?" I just always say, "How is the best dressed man in the convention circuit?"
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's always snappy.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. So, again, it's been a while. Usually we're paired off with Princess Bride peers or Nightmare peers. So it's been a while. It's been a one-on-one. So
I think we've done a Fright Night too, haven't we?
We've done Fright Night.
Yeah.
We've done all those other 5 properties, and we'll talk about them too. But let's go back to some of the individual stuff, and most importantly, let's talk about this wonderful podcast of yours.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yes,
that's very kind. Yeah, during the pandemic, I have a brother-in-law who is a podcast freak. He listens to them all the time. He lives in Los Angeles, so he's always in his car, right? And we're talking about what we're doing, and he said, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm basically sitting around. Nobody's working. I'm just hanging. I'm languishing," is the word I used. And he said, "Do a podcast." And I said, "Todd," his name is Todd, obviously, what am I going to do a podcast about? And he said, "Come on." He said, You grew up in a restaurant," which I did. My dad owned a restaurant in this small coal mining town I grew up in West Virginia. You're Greek. You cook for us all the time. I've cooked all my life because I've worked in the restaurant from the time I was a kid. He said, "Do a podcast about food." And I thought, well, I don't know what to talk about. So he said, "Listen to some podcasts and see." And I started listening to podcasts about food. There are a lot of them out there if you guys are into podcasts. And they were all interesting to me, but nothing struck a personal chord. But then I went, duh, you grew up in a restaurant. So talk to people about growing up around food. What was it like around your house? What was it like around the dinner table? And it might sound like it's a fairly limiting subject because some people... and I got a lot of people, by the way, who tell me, "Oh, God, my family, the food was terrible. My mom or my dad or whomever was cooking was a terrible cook." But there are still stories. There are family stories always around food somehow, around the table or the lack thereof. I mean, one of my first podcasts was with a man named Michael Patrick King, who was one of the first executive producers of Sex and the City and is now the showrunner and the creator of, what's the sequel? Yes, yeah, sorry. And Michael's a friend. He wrote a couple of plays that my wife and I were in way back in Los Angeles. And so and Michael said, you know, my mother was, she was unhappy all of the time. She hated being a cook. She hated being a housewife. The only time there was any flavor in the food was when she cried into the mashed potatoes. Well, that's a story, right? And then we always get off into other stuff as well, because these are generally people in show business, although I do interview a lot of chefs. I've done a lot of live conversations with, I did a live show with Jacques Pepin from the PBS series, you know, and also this great human being who probably was responsible for bringing French food to the United States. Lydia Bastianich, who has a show on PBS, who did a live show with me. A woman named Alice Waters, who's the mother of the farm-to-table movement in this country, and has the restaurant Chez Panisse in Oakland, that is like one of the formative restaurants in this country for farm-to-table food. Plus, you know, actors. I did one with my ex-wife, Susan, and it was a great show. We had a great time, and a lot of them are virtual. I just did one for those of you who are fans of Halloween, the original Freddy. I'm sorry, Michael Myers, forgive me, is a guy by the name of Nick Castle, who's a director, and I worked with Nick many years ago when he directed me in a television pilot that didn't get sold, but we just connected in a show, and I said, do my podcast, and he said, okay.
Nick Castle was the director of The Last Starfighter, if we have any fans of that.
Yeah, exactly.
And several other like really good films.
Who became a director, but he's an old friend of John Carpenter's, and he tells I'm not going to tell you how it happened because you have to listen to the podcast. Or watch it, because I do them all on video as well. And Nick tells the story of how he became Michael Myers, which is really interesting. And also he's a great
he's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
I've done him, and then I've done John back in the virtual days. If anyone wants to go to GalaxyCon's YouTube show, you'll find Chris and I and his past mates. We had these cast reunions during lockdown and stuff, and it was the one shining thing that kind of came out of that terrible period, was that we got to do these virtual, and we got to bring in castmates of his from his projects that we wouldn't probably be able to bring in this way too. So yeah, check it out if you get a chance. We cover a lot of ground in that, which actually leads me into one thing. We lost Ken. Yeah.
One of the sad times of my life lately. Ken Page, Oogie Boogie, a great man. And also a fantastic talent, a great singer. He did an amazing cabaret show of stuff that he put together that Ken did, and it's interesting because during the making of The Nightmare Before Christmas, he and I never worked together. I didn't work with anybody else except for Catherine O'Hara one day. She and I did all the Sally and Jack scenes together. But other than that, I was in the studio with Henry Selick the whole time. And so I really got to know Ken from coming to cons and spending time with him, just sitting around talking, and we became really close friends. And but such is life, c'est la vie.
Yeah. He is missed. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's I think we covered everything else too. So thank you for indulging my capricious curiosity. And before I go on out there taking questions, though, as I've told you several times before, and I will continue to say it, thank you. Thank you for your talents and your professionalism and all the performances you brought to all your roles.
Thank you. Thank you. The gift is mine. I don't mean that in the sense that I'm gifted. I mean, I've been gifted by being in a lot of great projects with wonderful people. So, as I said to John Carlo, just hit me upside the head, as we used to say in West Virginia.
Absolutely.
Hit me upside the head.
All right. So, if you think you're going to ask one, go to raise a hand. We'll figure out if I'll do... All right, I'll come around to you all, and then if it gets a little crazy, we'll do a line. So, all right, we'll do this young lady here with this. Hey, what's your name?
That's volleyball.
Oh, the volleyball. Okay, that's volleyball. What's that? What's his name?
That's Rocky.
Rocky.
And then that's
Prince Rufus.
Hi,
Okay,
guys.
wow, very you got titles and
We
everything.
have a
for
couple
them.
of babies here.
So, oh, right, is that you? So what's your name?
I'm Carrie. Hi, Carrie. What do you want to know? So, my favorite question to ask is, what experiences have you gotten because of what you do that you normally would not have had?
First of all, interestingly, I'm basically an introvert, if you can believe that. I know my wife and I talk about this all the time because she likes to have dinner parties and have people over and to hang out and to sit around and talk, and she loves to talk. And I'm Silent Bob around the house. I think I take after my dad, who was very kind of, clinched and quiet. And it forces, I don't want to use the word force. I've been really fortunate to have been part of a number of things in my life, particularly work projects, with a lot of really talented, really interesting people. Sometimes they're flawed people. Sometimes they're not the best people in the world, but they are always amazingly talented. And I think hopefully that's rubbed off on me to a certain extent. I mean, I went to college and graduate school, but I've always felt like I've learned from watching. And I think the great gift I've been given is that I'm pretty good at observing, and I have a pretty good ear for what works and what doesn't work. And I'm a little bit musical. I've done some Broadway musicals. So I have pretty good timing, and it was kind of, it was a gift that came to me somehow through my DNA, I guess. And so all of that, I guess, curiosity and listening and absorbing what's good and what's not, and copying the best. Copying people who are really good, which I'm pretty good at.
Great question. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
All right. That's over here. Yeah, let me squeeze. Sorry. Yeah, good. Hey, what's your name?
Emily.
Hi, Emily.
Hi. What was your favorite movie you've ever been in, or what was your favorite role you've ever played?
I always give the cop-out of, just like asking me who my favorite child is. Because they're all, you get totally consumed in every role. You have to, that's my job, is to understand the character, no matter whether it's a villain or a hero or somewhere in between. But I guess it's the ones that challenged me that I find as my favorites. I've had probably a better time doing things like, I had a great time doing Fright Night. We had a wonderful cast, and we just were a unit, and we just had a wonderful shoot. Same with The Princess Bride. We had a wonderful time on the set, lots of laughter and great times on the set. But the one that I'm, I guess, proudest of is A Tale of Two Cities, which I did for Hallmark Hall of Fame back in the, ancient times. And because I was playing two parts, the characters were totally different, and there were challenges along the way, and I felt like, wow. And I got to work with some of the great British actors alive at that time. Some of these names you may remember: Peter Cushing, who on the first day of rehearsal, I walked in, and he was sitting on a chair in the rehearsal room, and he had a white glove on with the fingertips cut off, smoking a cigarette. The white glove was so the nicotine wouldn't stain his fingers, right? And he was smoking like this. And I walked over to him and I said, "Mr. Cushing, hello, Chris Sarandon, very nice to meet you." He said, "Hello, dear boy." And that was it. I just thought, oh, I'm in heaven, right? Very elegant gentleman, wonderful man. He played Dr. Manette, if you remember the characters in The Tale of Two Cities. It was a great experience for me, and I still think of it as being sort of a pinnacle of everything that goes together being an actor, not just playing the role, but also doing the stuff that's required when you make movies, which is a lot of it's technical in terms of timing. I mean, in that movie, because there was no CGI in those days, and talking about ancient times, folks, the two characters would have scenes together, but they couldn't do it with computers. So what they did was, there was a camera sitting out there and say, I'm doing the scene here, right? And I'm playing a scene with me, okay? So what they did was the camera was locked off, meaning it was literally nailed down to the floor so it wouldn't move, and then over the lens, a half moon, so that the half moon was on this side when I was playing this part, this side, so that you couldn't see this character, right? And I'm doing it with another actor, the scene. And then I turn around, change, get into a different makeup, go around to that side, and in the meantime, they're literally by hand rolling the film back in the camera. Literally grinding it back with a crank, right? And it's synced by the clapper so that they know where the scene actually started. And then sitting over here and doing the scene with the half moon on that side of the lens. And with a earplug in, listening to my dialogue from when I did this side. No, am I making sense? Okay, so that the timing has to be perfect. And once the film has gone through twice, you're done. You can't do it again because you've exposed both sides of the film. And it just so happened the day we were shooting that scene, it was the end of the day when we were shooting the scene. So that if we didn't get it right on this take over here, it was the last take of the day. It meant we had to come back to this set. We couldn't go on to the next location. We couldn't do anything. We had to come back, which cost like $150,000, $200,000 or something like that, right? And I got over here and I did this one and I nailed it. And I was so proud. There was something about that feeling of, I'm not only working as an actor, but I'm also working as part of this team. And we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all collaborating together. That's one of the great things about making movies, too, is that you're part of a big sort of machine, but there are times when it's the interaction between you and the crew, the technical people, it's all about, it's everything together.
And to make note, another layer of that too was you had to do a makeup and costume change as well.
Well,
he wasn't playing like a double or anything. He was like, you know the characters, one's very elegant young gentleman and the other one's slovenly.
A dissolute, drunkard, actually.
Yes,
an alcoholic.
so you had to go pray there to tussle you up and everything else. And were you afraid you're going to lose the moment?
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, always. And then there's the fear, because you know that you don't have another chance. You gotta come up with it. So it was like a seminal moment in my life where I thought, wow, I did that. Wow. Anyway, the long answer to your question.
It pops up on Tubi occasionally. Check it out. It really is a magnificent.
It's also a great story.
Yes,
it's one of the great stories of all time.
That's absolutely. Hey,
it's a far better thing I do than I've ever done before.
I'm
that one.
Vanessa.
I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead. I'm still ranting on about.
I was just curious.
What's your name?
Vanessa.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi. I was just curious. Did you ever get a chance to improv in any of your movies, and they kept it in the movie?
Yeah, there was a fair amount of improvisation in Dog Day Afternoon with Al Pacino, and I work with Al mostly. I have to say it this way, that the scene that was written, I don't know if you guys remember that movie, but there's a telephone scene between my character, who's a would-be transsexual, and Al's character, who's in a bank, who's just robbed the bank to pay for the transsexual operation. And it was a big, true story, by the way, that occurred back in New York back in the 70s. And Sidney Lumet, the director, who also directed Serpico and any number of great movies, he directed like a theater director because he came from the theater. So we rehearsed for 3 weeks. And the first rehearsal, we sat down and we were reading the scene. And when we finished, Al Pacino and I both felt that the scene was, it was a melodramatic scene, written melodramatically. And sometimes that's called, my wife has a great expression, it's putting a hat on a hat. That if something's already melodramatic, the dialogue doesn't have to be. The dialogue can be every day about, and also it was important that the two characters you knew that the two characters had a history, right? So the scene originally started out with them shouting at each other on the phone, how could you do this? I'm doing it for you. It went on and on. And we both felt like, no, these guys have known each other for years. They've been through hell together. How would it start? I don't know. How you doing? I don't know. And then I'm dying. I don't know. How are you? I'm this and that. It's like, it's a relationship. And it happened to be at a time when gay characters didn't appear on screen often, right? So this was a gay relationship. And the important thing was, this is like any other relationship. It can be toxic, it can be great. These guys are going through a toxic relationship. And so we started improvising with that in mind, and then when we finished doing the scene with all of the information that was already written, then the director, Sidney Lumet, said, wait, ho, and he had somebody come and record it. And we would do it over and over again, different ways. We left this information out. We need this part. And so it ended up being similar to the scene that was written, but it was, ultimately it was improvised, and then we chose one, and that's the scene we did. We didn't mess around with it after that. We didn't improvise on camera. We said it like it was, it was scripted. And then that's the way we did it. Yeah. And it was a cool way to work too, because you feel like you're contributing, and at the same time you're part of the writer's original intent. You're not messing around with the material. You're just making it a little better.
Great question.
Hopefully.
Thank you. So, I'm going to show some love to some folks over here. I'll kind of like arch around. Well, who thinks they got a question? Raise your hand up high. I'll tell you what. Let's do this then. Who's the girl? Okay. You come on with me, and then everybody else will do a line over here. So as everybody gets that on up, that way I can save time. I won't have to run around and get more of your questions. So, okay. So everybody do a line after this young lady. Okay, what's your name?
Jess.
Hi, Jess.
Dog Day Afternoon is one of my favorite movies
Oh.
of all time. Did you ever get to meet Sonny, the real one?
No, we didn't meet any of the real people. We did have a lot of information because it was a big, a media event. There were, as the movie shows, lots of television cameras. There was coverage from, there were helicopters. I just talked to Lou Ferrigno this morning and yesterday. He lived in that neighborhood when it happened, and he remembers it vividly, the news helicopters flying over and the craziness. I mean, it was just nuts. So we had a lot of material, newspaper articles, interviews with the people. I heard, I stole a lot of the stuff, the grasping of the robe when he comes in from the hospital. Stuff like that. There was a photograph of him when he arrived on the scene. Very much, so we picked a lot from reality, but the whole movie was scripted. Yeah.
Good one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, what's your name?
Hi, I'm Pax.
Hi, Pat.
Was there ever a moment where you just couldn't stay in character and you kept breaking over and over again?
Stay in character and what?
Like stay in character in general, like in any movie.
Through the whole movie? It's never been the way I work. I think of myself as a sort of a chameleon in the sense that I feel like I can change colors sort of on the spot. There have been times when if you're doing a very emotional scene, which I've done in a few movies, and you want to keep in that frame of mind, I've gone off by myself and I don't mix with anybody and I don't talk to anybody. But just in terms of, I know that, for instance, like Daniel Day-Lewis, who's famous for staying in character all through the movie when he did the Lincoln movie, and that he stayed in character through the whole shoot. But no, is the answer. No, I've never really done that. But, there are times when I've sort of kept myself aside when I've had to.
Where it takes. Thank you. Good
Thank
question.
you.
Hey, what's your name?
Hey, my name is Byron.
Hey, Byron.
I was just wondering, hello, what's the best bit of advice or most impactful bit of advice that you've ever received from a director, stage director, or fellow actor?
Best advice, getting back to Dog Day again, when I went into to audition for Dog Day, and I walked into the into the waiting room where everybody's waiting to audition, and all the guys were dressed in drag. And I was dressed in I was probably dressed in jeans and I don't know, shirt, whatever I normally go to auditions in, and I thought, oh, I've really screwed up. But then I went in, and I knew Pacino from just socially because I was in a Broadway show with his ex-girlfriend, and so we had met a few times. So I felt comfortable, and Sidney Lumet, the director, was also, my ex-wife Susan had worked with him once, so I knew Sidney. So I felt kind of comfortable, and I did the scene, and then after the scene, he came up to me and he said, just one line, he said, "A little less Blanche Dubois and a little more Queen's Housewife." And that's immediately, I went, oh, of course. And he said, we want you to come back. And when I came back, that's the way I did it. Yeah, it's like, I'm talking like that. I'm from Queens. That's the best direction I've ever gotten.
So cool. Good one. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, what's your name?
Hi there, I'm Joe.
Hey, Joe.
My question's a little bit more niche. If you have any favorite memory from your time in Washington, D.C., or with Father Hartke, or a performance of back from your D.C. time?
Joe's talking about, I went to graduate school in Washington at Catholic University, which was one of the few schools at the time that had a performing degree where you could get a degree without having to write a thesis. And so my great memory was actually that in order to get your thesis, you not only had to act in shows, but you also had to stage manage. So in order to stage manage, you had to know about everything in the theater. You had to know about the scenery. You had to know about the props. You had to know about the sound design. And not only that, but you also had to do all of the paperwork. You had to put down all the floor plans, the scenic design plans. You had to draw them or render them and put them all in a book. And you had to be an assistant stage manager, and then you had to be a stage manager. And then you had to call the show, which means stage managers in the theater, they sit backstage, they've got they've got headphones on and a mic, but they're calling all the light cues and all the sound cues. And they have a book that literally has got sound cue number 1, number 7, and they're all attached to dialogue, and the timing has to be exactly right where the light cue comes. When you guys see a show, there's a lot of stuff that's going on backstage, particularly with a stage manager. And the great thing about that is that you learn everybody else's job. And so when I started working in the professional theater and also in movies, I had a much better sense of, I'm watching the guys who are the gaffers, the guys who do the lighting in movies, the director of photography, what he's doing, because that can enhance my performance. That we work back to this description that I made of what I did in The Tale of Two Cities, is that you have to have a symbiotic relationship. And that was the great lesson that I learned at Catholic U, enabled me to do that. And also, they have a touring company, and I toured for a year doing Shakespeare and Moliere and driving the truck and being the lighting designer. So, it was a great experience.
Thank you. Great one. Poor Scotterell. Hey, what's your name?
Liz.
What you got, Liz?
What was your favorite memory of acting in Princess Bride?
Favorite moment? Favorite moment from The Princess Bride. Oh, well, mine was standing in the grove just before we go down into the pit of despair with Count Rugen and giving that great speech. I've got my wife to murder, Gilder to frame for it, I'm swamped. It's just such a perfect little kind of character, and it tells you everything about the character, right? And also that line, try ruling the world sometime. Yeah, that's another great one. But then that's what you get when you work with William Goldman, who is an Academy Award-winning screenwriter before The Princess Bride. And by the way, for those of you who are not familiar with William Goldman, he the Princess Bride came from, one day he literally walked in, and he had 2 daughters, and he walked in and said to them, I'm going to write a movie for you guys. What do you want it to be about? And one of them said, a princess, and the other one said, a bride. And so that's where the impetus from it came. But it also became, despite the fact that he had been highly decorated and award-winning in his career, that it was his favorite movie because it was his most personal. And there's a story, and I don't think it's apocryphal, I think it's true, that when Wesley almost died, that is, when Wesley died in the script, he went into the bathroom and wept. He was so upset because he was so sort of bound up in the story, writing the story. Yeah.
What's your favorite scene of Humperdinck?
There's a lot of good ones. I do like the one like before the grove when he's sitting out there before he goes into the pit of despair. That one's a really good one.
All right, good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, great cosplay. Hey, what's your name?
Lexi.
Hi, Lexi.
So you mentioned that you grew up in a small town. So I was wondering how the switch from growing up in a small town to being a pretty well-known actor was.
You're asking for my life story. I grew up with Greek parents, both of whom my mother's parents were immigrants. My dad was an immigrant. They spoke Greek at home, and there were no Greeks in my town. Actually, one family, I'm sorry. And also my uncle, his brother, was there. He had 2 brothers actually there. And so I spent a lot of time trying to fit in. And what you have to do when you're trying to fit in a situation like that is you act. You pretend you're something else. I pretended I wasn't a Greek boy who spoke Greek at home. And I think that was the beginning of it. Yeah. I think that the small town kind of informed that as well. Also, you know everybody knows everybody else. I also worked in the restaurant, so I got a chance to observe people in a setting that was not like high school or middle school or grade school. I was exposed to grown-ups a lot in my dad's restaurant. And I got comfortable talking to them and, bantering and what have you. And so, I mean, it all kind of came together as a result. But I loved growing up in a small town. When you could go out literally in the morning when there was not school, my cousin and I, or whomever, whatever friend I had who probably lived half a block away or a block away, we'd go out. And at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, my mother would blow a whistle at dinner time to let us know that it was time to come home. And the rest of the time, we were just on our own. We could do whatever we wanted. Yeah, it's a time that doesn't exist, I don't think, in too many places anymore.
Great question, thank you. Hey, what's your name?
My name is Braden.
What you got?
Hey, Braden.
So I was wondering if you ever rewatch your old projects for either entertainment or self-improvement, or once you're in a project, you hate rewatching, hate the sound of your own voice, never
Most of them. No, I don't. I mean, sometimes I'll happen across something that's playing, and then we'll watch. My wife and I are sitting, and we're watching, or she's channel surfing, and there's The Princess Bride or Dog Day or something, and it's usually her who will stop and watch. I'm not one to dwell on past glory, except here.
Hey, there you go, good one.
Thank you.
Hi, what's your name?
Elizabeth. So my 2 favorite movies, like forever, if I had to only own 2 DVDs, it would be Charade with Audrey Hepburn, Cary Grant.
Great movie.
Yeah, and The Princess Bride, which I could quote the entire thing to.
Yeah, Charade.
Okay, start now.
No.
I had the opportunity on a number of occasions to sit around a table with Stanley Donen, who directed Charade, who also directed Singing in the Rain and a bunch of other great movies. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
So my question is, what are some of your favorite movies or TV shows?
How Green Was My Valley. You guys familiar with How Green Was My Valley? The great John Ford, any John Ford movie. Searchers, The Searchers. There's a wonderful, when you're talking about horror movies, people ask me about horror movies. One of my favorite horror movies is a movie called Don't Look Now, directed by a guy named Nicholas Roeg, who was a director of photography. It was Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie, about a couple who lose their child, and they go to Venice, and it's the creepiest. It's like
That's been getting a big resurgence.
Yeah?
The past 18 months, people have begun
rediscovering
it.
Because it's
yeah,
a great
people,
movie,
yeah.
and it has such a wonderful kind of atmosphere to it, and you feel unsettled through the whole thing, and it's not like, it's not jump cuts, it's not screams, it's really just creepy and
dread.
Yeah,
There's a lot of dread.
I mean, it's really good, beautifully shot.
So yeah,
and great
absolutely.
performances too.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Sorry. Thank you. Hey, what's your name?
Lenita.
Hi.
Hello. I teach middle school theater for a living, and
Good for you.
Thank you.
We need our teachers. Bravo.
I show The Princess Bride when we learn melodrama every year. It's a great example. As an educator, I was wondering if you have a piece of advice or any certain starting place for young actors that you would give them.
For young actors, usually when a young actor comes to me and says, "Can you give me some advice?" And the first thing I do is I say, "Don't." Now, I don't mean to be negative, but it is a life of rejection, and you have to be shielded from that by your own sense of self and self-worth. If you can do that and not take it personally, I tell this story all the time, forgive me if you've heard it, but my daughter and a friend one of my daughters, when she was like 5 years old, 6 years old, and they were sitting having ice cream with a friend's mom, and the friend's mom says to her own daughter, they were talking about what their daddies did. And she asked her own daughter, and her daughter said, "Oh, Daddy makes wires in houses." And she said, "That's all right. Yeah, that's right. He's an electrician." And she asked my daughter what he did, what I did, and she said, "Yeah, he looks for work." Because that was her experience. I was gone some of the time, and then most of the time when I was at home, I was on the phone, or I was doing an audition or whatever, and 9/10 of the time, I did not get the job. And in the Actors Union, the SAG, and now it's SAG-AFTRA, but at one point, the Screen Actors Guild, which I think had something like 90,000 members, 10% of them are working. So it requires constant, you have to be able to be inured to rejection, because that happens a lot. That's the majority of your. Did you ever watch La La Land, that wonderful musical movie with Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone? I just watched it again the other day, and she's an actress who's constantly rejected. Then of course, she becomes a big star in the movie, but that doesn't happen that often. And if you're lucky, I guess the one I would have, the advice I would have is, don't search for celebrity. Search for a career. Have a career in doing what you love. If you can do that, then you're one of the few, and you'll be very lucky, and you'll be very happy. And that's been my life.
Here, take two, and again, thank you for helping the youth of America.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Chris, before we go, any projects or anything on the horizon you can share with us?
No specific projects, actually. I need to take a little time off. I've had a season on the podcast. I'm reconsidering whether I'm going to start a season 4, but I do that every summer. I think about it, and then I decide I want to do it again. But I may be coming back with it, doing it on a more kind of selective basis rather than doing it every week or two, because it's a bear to do.
People look up the podcasting. I say, like, the trick is whatever your schedule is, you got to stick to it.
Yeah.
So you could do an extended schedule. So instead, do like every 6 weeks or 8 weeks, something like that.
Yeah,
so.
I'm thinking of sort of doing it more. In fact, I think I'm going to have Danny Trejo next season, this coming season. and some wonderful chefs and some other actors and some interesting people, too. I have one of my guests this year was my primary care doctor, who is a nutritionist and a cardiologist as well, and a woman. And she's told wonderful stories about being in, cardiac residency, and how she made it. Everybody was wearing scrubs because the women were trying to look like the men, and it's such a sort of alpha male kind of specialty. And she went to work every day she would wear a skirt and a jacket and a blouse, and she said, I always was turned out every day because I was determined to keep myself. And she ended up becoming a primary care doctor because she said, I don't want to be at the end chain of when things are happening, when it's too late. I want to be at the beginning, where you're telling people how to eat, how to, take care of themselves. So, yeah, there's a lot of interesting people in the world, by the way.
And one final question. Would you like to take a picture with this wonderful audience?
Oh my gosh, absolutely.